If you want to turn in your Bibles, flip that off and see if we get where we're not getting double. All right, if you want to turn in your Bibles, Mark chapter 9, verses 2 through 8. Mark chapter 9. That would be in the Gospels. Matthew, Mark. There we go. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And I'm going to have to tell y'all there are two things here. So I am preaching a sermon that somebody else wrote. Dad wrote the sermon, and I have reviewed it and gone through it because I didn't know for sure that I was preaching until Friday. And then the other thing is, I left my reading glasses at work when I left for my last day on Friday, and I've hit that point where some things are a little small. So just bear with me as I make some adjustments as we're going through today. But let's look at Mark chapter 9, and we're just going to read verses 2 through 8 here real quick. It says, 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John and brought them up on a high mountain by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. And his garments became radiant and exceedingly white, as no launderer on earth can whiten them. Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, Rabbi, is it good for us to be here? Let us make 3 tabernacles for you, and one for Moses and one for Elijah. For he did not know what to answer, for they became terrified. When a cloud formed overshadowing them, and a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." All at once they looked around and saw no one with them anymore except Jesus alone. All right. So in Mark chapter 9, 2 through 8, we titled this today, Jesus, the One and Only. Okay, as we look through the scriptures here, we hear that Moses and Elijah appear. See, this is a pivotal moment in Jesus' life, as well as in the lives of Peter, James, and John. This is 6 days after Peter's great confession, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And after Peter's confession, Matthew records an important verse in Matthew 16, verse 21. And he said, "From that time, Jesus began to point out to his disciples that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem to suffer many things from the elders, chief priests, and scribes, and to be killed and to be raised up on the 3rd day." So now, those 6 days have passed since Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." And we see that Jesus has gone up on a mountain in Galilee to pray. But the question is, why did he need to go pray? Well, he needed to go pray because he knew it was necessary to go to Jerusalem and suffer and to be killed and to be raised up on the 3rd day. Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record this in the Gospels, and Peter even refers to it in his second letter. And that's in 2 Peter verse 1, 16 through 18. And he says, "For we did not follow cleverly devised tales when we made known to you the power and coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. For when he received honor and glory from God the Father, such a declaration was made to him by the majestic glory. This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. And we ourselves heard the declaration made from heaven when we were with him on the holy mountain." Now, in these scriptures, we know that the transfiguration is what we're looking at. We know that this was, number one, a miracle. But the other thing is, it was a sign. But what did it signify? What did it mean for Jesus? What did it mean for the disciples? And what does it mean for us today? So as we go through our lesson here today, we are going to look at several different aspects here. So the first thing we want to look at is Jesus is transfigured. Jesus is transfigured. So Jesus takes Peter, James, and John and goes up into the mountains. Now, people debate what was the mountain, where was the mountain, where exactly was this place. We're not really sure. There's three places that are possible places that this mountain was. Number one was Mount Hermon, which is the tallest mountain in Israel. And so it's 9,232 feet, but that mountain's not in Galilee. One is Mount Myron, which is the highest mountain in Galilee, and that is 3,926 feet. And the third is Mount Tabor. And this is the traditional site. This is where most people believe, but it is only 1,929 feet. Here's the thing. Which mountain, though, is not really important. People search and want to know this, but that's not really the point of this whole thing. So the question comes along, though, of why did Jesus go to the mountain with Peter and James and John? Well, in Luke 9:28, it says, he took along Peter, John, and James and went up to the mountain to pray. Okay? He went to pray. Well, we also see in our text from Mark chapter 9 that Jesus has been pointing out all of these different things as well. And so then also jump to Matthew chapter 16, verse 21. We'll read 21 through 23 here, and it says, for that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. He must suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and must be killed and raised up on the third day. All right, so that's the why for why Jesus went up there. He's needing to point one of the other whys. He's needing to point out to the disciples what things are going on, what things are happening. But I want you to see what happens while he's got Peter, James, and John with him there. And in verse 22, it says, Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord, this shall never happen to you. You see, Peter was a little quick with, he cuts off an ear. We see in the garden, Peter's first one to say, that you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Sometimes Peter's hurriedness was a good thing, and sometimes it was Peter kind of sticking his foot in his mouth and speaking before he knew what he was saying. And we got one of those situations here. He says, God forbid it. This should never happen to you. because he's worried about Jesus dying. He's like, this can't be. But if you go down to verse 23, we see what Jesus says to Peter. It says, "But he turned and said to Peter, 'Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. For you are not setting your mind on God's interest, but on man's.'" And so Jesus rebukes Peter here and says, look, this is what you're doing right now is you're thinking about what you want and not about what God's plan is. And so he tells Peter to stop talking. It's time. Basically says it's time for you to sit down and be quiet. And he calls him Satan. And if you watch the video from Mark Moore, Mark was talking in his video this week about that anything that gets in the way of God's plan is equal to Satan. And so he says this comment from Peter, Jesus is looking at him and he's saying, "Get behind me, Satan," because he's not focused on God's plan. You see, Jesus needed to pray because he knows what's coming. I mean, could you imagine being omnipotent and knowing everything that's going to happen? And Jesus knows that the whip is going to go across his back. He knows he's going to have to carry that cross down the road. He knows that he is going to have that crown of thorns shoved down on his head. He knows that spear is going to pierce his side. He knows that he's not just going to die, but he is going to die a terrible, horrible, tragic death. Jesus needed to go pray because he knows what all is about to come to him. But here's the other thing. Jesus needs the disciples to really understand what is about to happen and who he really is. You see, Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Peter is amazing at some of the things that come out, like we just said. But Jesus knows that the disciples still do not fully understand. And our text says that Jesus is pointing things out to them. He's trying to help them see what's going to happen because he knows their faith is going to be tested. But he needs them to know, I am God. He needs them to know that even though I am going to die, I am still in control. And so then we look and we see that Jesus becomes transfigured. And his face was shining like the sun. His garments became white. And we see this all the time, like when Moses, we read, if we jump all the way back, when Moses sees God and receives the Ten Commandments, Moses had to wear a mask from that point on because he saw God's back and his face shined from having seen that. There's a song that Riley likes a lot called "I Want to Be the Moon," and it talks about reflecting God's light. And it says, "I want to be like the moon because I want to shine that light back to others." But you see, when we read through this, when you dig in, when you look at what's actually happening here, Jesus is not being a moon. He's not being a light that's reflecting. Jesus has this light shining from within, It's not some spotlight shining down on him. It's not the clouds open and there's a bright light. It's not these Sunday school coloring pages that we see of, the clouds open, this bright light comes down. Jesus is the light. And the light starts radiating from him. And so Jesus is God who became flesh. John 1 verse 14 says, "And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we saw his glory, glory of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." You see, his glory was not surrendered at the incarnation, but rather covered and contained in his fleshly body. The word transfigured is metamorpho. Anybody recognize any other words that go along with metamorpho? All right. It means metamorphosis. It means to change, to transfigure, to transform. It suggests the idea of a caterpillar in a cocoon coming out as a butterfly. And transformation is the goal for humanity. 1 John chapter 3 verse 2 says, "Beloved, now we are children of God, and it has not appeared as yet what we will be. We know that when he appears, we will be like him, because we will see him as he is." You know, as I read through that, and as I was going through this sermon and trying to think about it a little bit about what this all meant, you know, it kind of came to me. I was like, so the caterpillar, the cocoon, and the butterfly. And you know, when we're born, we're that caterpillar. You know, we are who we are and what we are, and there is what we're being. But you know, a lot of times when we talk about baptism, we talk about the death, the burial, and the resurrection of a new creature, and we think of ourselves as the butterfly at that point. But I really, as I was going through this, I said, are we the butterfly or are we the cocoon? You see, because when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon, it's becoming something beautiful. And as Christians, you know, we're still not perfect by any means. We still mess up. There are still things, but we should be becoming more beautiful each day. You see, and so then when we meet Jesus, is that the point where we become the butterfly? Because it says that we will be like him and we will see him just as he is. Second thing that we want to look at today is Jesus' visitors. And so on the mountain, Jesus has two visitors. Let's jump back to Mark and verses 4 through 7. So Elijah appeared to them along with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. So let's stop right there. So in 4, we see that Moses and Elijah have come. Why Moses? Why Elijah? Well, Mark Moore says that Moses is the founder of Judaism because he takes the Jews out of Egypt. So you've got Abraham's the father, but Moses is the founder. Moses is also, though, the mediator of the law. So Moses brought the 10 Commandments down. He gave them to the people. He was kind of the person who oversaw the law at that point. Excuse me. Elijah was the first prophet and the representative of all the prophets. And so, excuse me, as they came down, what were they discussing? Well, in Luke 9, verse 31, it says, who appearing in glory were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Departure, the Greek word is Exodus. Also a book of the Bible, Exodus. So they're talking with Jesus about his exit, about his departure, about how he's going to leave. And they're there to help Jesus prepare for what's about to happen. You know, Moses had seen the back of God, and he's gone on at this point. Elijah never died and was taken away in a whirlwind. And so these two guys have come back, and they're talking with Jesus, and they're helping him get ready for what's about to come, because not only is Jesus going to die and raise again, but Jesus is going to go through amazing, awesome, miraculous exit from the earth too. And so they're there to talk with him. Now Peter in verse 5 says, hey, let's build 3 tabernacles, right? He says, let's get a place there. One for Moses, one for Elijah, and one for Jesus. The tabernacle would be kind of a brush arbor or a tent made from tree branches and brush. And all the Jews were commanded to live in such tents during the Feast of Tabernacles to remember the wandering in the wilderness. Peter had made the great confession, and now he wants to say something, and he doesn't know what to say. I mean, he's seen 2 guys that have been dead for a long time come back, and he knows that he is seeing something great. Mark 9 verse 6 says, for he did not know how to reply, and that they became terrified. He must have said what he said because he wanted to honor all 3 men. He knew that they were all 3 great individuals. He may have thought in that hour that the reign of Jesus had come. This is the Jews had been looking for an earthly kingdom a lot of the times. The Pharisees and the Sadducees, that's still what they're looking for, is a king to come and rule right there on the earth. And Peter may think, hey, this is about to happen. This is it right here. This is what's going on right now. But there's an important lesson here. And Peter is trying to learn. But the lesson is one that your mama teaches you when you're really young. If you don't know what to say, don't say anything at all. And Peter is not sure what to say, but he's like, I got to say something. And he says, let's build a tabernacle for all three. When that happens, we look at verse 7, and in verse 7, there comes a third visitor. Now that third visitor is a cloud. Where have we seen a cloud before? Well, we've seen a pillar of cloud lead the Jews through the wilderness. We see when Moses goes up on the mountain, it says it was like there was a cloud, but it was like a terrible storm. And so God's there in that place. J.W. McGarvey suggests that the brightness of this cloud and the fear which it produced suggests that it was, and I'm going to butcher this word, so I'm just going to spell it at first. It's S-H-E-C-H-I-N-A-H. Shekinah, or cloud of glory, which was the symbol of God's presence. And so then from this cloud comes a voice that says, this is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Again, a phrase that we've heard at another place. When Jesus was baptized, a voice comes from the heavens saying, this is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. This time the voice says, this is my Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. That voice spoke at Sinai, at the baptism, and is declaring Jesus' superiority to Moses and Elijah. And he is commanding that all hear him. And so Moses and Elijah are the lawgivers of the people of God. Moses and Elijah are not the lawgivers of the people of God, but rather that Jesus is. The saints are bidden to turn from every human teacher, even those revered, such as Moses and Elijah, and they are to listen to Jesus. The third thing that we want to look at today is verse 8 of this text. So in verse 8, you still got Peter, James, and John there observing. But all of a sudden, after the voice from the cloud, Moses and Elijah are gone. And it says that they only saw who? They only saw Jesus. The disciples' response when they heard the voice from the cloud was that they fell down on the ground because they were terrified. And when they looked up, they only saw Jesus. And out of the cloud, the voice gave its authoritative testimony of the uniqueness of Jesus. And under the cover of the cloud, Moses and Elijah vanished. We need Jesus. As a teacher, you go through things with kids and you teach them wants and needs, wants and needs, wants and needs. As a special ed teacher, you do it for a long time because you're trying to make sure that kids understand there are things that you want and there are things that you need. Now, to live on this earth, we need air, we need water, we need food. There are some things that we need. But to live eternally, there's only one thing that we need. And that's Jesus. We need Jesus. You know, this world, it's a little crazy sometimes. There's all kinds of things competing for our attention, all kinds of voices telling us, I need this from you, I need you to do that, I need you to go here, I need you to go there. If you're a student, you got your teachers telling you, you got to get this in by this time, you got to have that in by that time. You got your parents telling you, I need you to do this at home, I need you to do this here. All right, you got your boyfriend or girlfriend, if you have one, saying, I need to talk to you, I need to do this. If you're an adult, you've got your boss saying, hey, I need this, hey, I need that. You got your spouse saying, hey, I need you to come over here and help me with this. You got your children saying, hey, I need you to come here, I need you to go there. Not all the voices are bad, but if they're distracting us and taking us away from Jesus, then that's a problem. And we need to reevaluate where our priorities lie, because when we have Jesus first, the other things will fall into place. The only way to heaven is Jesus. John 14:6 says, Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Acts 4:12 says, there is no salvation, and there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven that has been given among mankind by which we must be saved. Ephesians 4:5 says, one Lord, one faith, one baptism. We have to keep our eyes focused on Jesus. Hebrews 12:2 says, looking only at Jesus, the originator and perfecter of the faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. When we focus on Jesus, we can run the race that God has set before us with confidence, and we can be sure that we are doing what's pleasing to Him. There's a song by Big Daddy Weave called Only Jesus. And so I'm going to read you some of the lyrics from that song. It says, who could find the words to describe the indescribable? Limited vocabulary falls so short of depicting you, God. Yet I'm distracted. The things of this world threaten to pull me apart. But in your mercy, your heart, you hear the cry of my heart. Only Jesus, only Jesus. Lord, I'm tired of all the rest. When my heart knows you are the best. Only Jesus, only Jesus. Son of God and Son of Man, who came to destroy the work of sin. And its work in me was crushed when you became the way for me. Help me surrender and stop pretending that I can live on my own. Only Jesus, only Jesus. Lord, I'm tired of all the rest. When my heart knows you are best. Only Jesus, only Jesus. You have a decision to make today. If you have not put Jesus first as your Lord and your Savior, if you are letting the things of this world distract you from what all's going on, if you haven't learned the lesson taught at the Transfiguration, that Jesus is God and He's the only thing that we need, then come as we stand and we sing our invitation song.